Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Saturday. A huge shout out to Morris Sussex Sports for restreaming this event. And I'm curious, what's everybody up to today? I'm sure you're either just finishing or going to practice or games, maybe even watching some sports. I'm a huge 49er fan, so I'll be watching the game on Sunday. Always taking my kids to their various activities too. We have Maya here from our marketing department, and she's going to be kind of my co-pilot here, and just so you can practice putting stuff in the chat. Hey, Maya.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. We're all happy you're here, and hopefully it's a beautiful day out there, so it's to do this. We're excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this topic of sports readiness screening or assessments, because it's just sports injuries in general are such an epidemic right now. I think that's from basically we went from being unable to play with our team and then just kind of ramping back up to things before the pandemic. And so we're just getting a lot of patients coming in from various sports injuries. So we felt motivated to get this information out there and prevent people from becoming patients. And even though we're discussing sports readiness screenings and assessments in the global sense, I'm basically also talking about ACL tears because I can speak to that personally and how devastating any sport injury can be, and also it can be a sport ending injury, and just it's a lot of things that I wish I knew about before getting injured.
Yeah, it's great. It's great information. It looks like somebody is running their kids around to practices, so it's a good day to do this because sports are, like you said, it's definitely ramping up. Everybody's excited this year. Everybody wants to play. Everybody's back in school. So we're super excited to do this for everybody.
Great. So without further ado, Maya, do you mind pulling up my presentation?
Of course.
All right. So like I mentioned earlier, we're discussing sports readiness assessments, and not only from an injury prevention perspective, but basically if you can move better, you're going to play better. So just kind of from even maximizing your performance in your sport. And that being said, I have a personal story I'd like to share with you that kind of set the stage of what I went through and what a lot of fellow athletes and also parents with their children are going through too. So Maya, if you don't mind hitting the next slide. So I was an avid soccer player. I played soccer majority of my life. Up until college, I played for Santa Clara. Go Broncos. It was a wonderful experience. I also played with the Olympic Development Program, but I also enjoyed other sports such as basketball, track and field, and snowboarding team. That being said, playing a lot of sports equals a lot of activity, leading to overtraining and also limiting recovery time. Ultimately, that led me to tearing my ACL during the NCAA tournament. I was able to return to play, not during the tournament, but with my team the next couple of years, but unfortunately developed some early onset arthritis, which happens in a majority of ACL tears. And that ended up taking me out of my sport completely. Silver lining was it motivated me to become a physical therapist, not only to help those recover from ACL injuries or just any sport injury, but just keep them from getting injured at all and letting them really perform at the best their body's going to allow them to. So I really want to shift the focus, and I think that's happening a lot more now. Just the importance of getting screened and someone assessing how you move just to decrease your risk of injury and also enhance your performance in your sport. So next slide. So it really is an epidemic, just in terms of ACL injuries. Basically, we're just seeing these numbers steadily rise, especially in the teen population. And the sports with the highest risks are both male and female, are soccer, basketball, lacrosse, and football. There is some risk with any sport that involves some cutting and jumping, which I'll discuss very shortly. And also wanted to discuss that female athletes are more likely than male athletes across all adolescent sports to tear their ACLs, which I'll also share that information with you too. Next. All right, so what am I going to talk today? So kind of again with the theme of sports readiness assessments and how they relate to injuries, I'm going to talk about why do ACL tears happen and how do they happen? What do I do if I tear my ACL? And how can I prevent this from happening at all? Next slide. All right, so how do ACL tears happen? So the ACL is a primary ligament in the middle of the knee. Ligaments attach bone to bone to provide stability to all our joints. And I have our handy little knee model here. So it's a little hard to tell, but this is the front of a knee. And this is the back where you can see all these ligaments inside and also on the sides here that provide stability to the knee. Oh yeah, thanks, Maya. So, you have your PCL back here too, and then your ACL comes across. And then you have, the ligaments on the side, your MCL and LCL. So certain movements, the ligaments support, right? So if I go a certain way, this way, you can see that the ligament stretches, and then this way on the side. So because the ACL is in the center, Maya, if you don't mind going back to the presentation slide, the excessive inward rotation of the knee and it moving towards the center and hyperextending or straightening really puts a ton of stress on the ACL, and that's when it tears. This can happen in two ways. It can be during a contact activity. So you see that often in football, somebody gets tackled in the knee and it puts the knee in those positions that I just mentioned. But 90% of the injuries to the ACL are during non-contact situations, just like jumping, cutting, pivoting, just playing your sport. And that being said, it's very rare that just the ACL gets injured in these circumstances. So it usually includes also that side ligament I showed you, the MCL. And I didn't get a chance on the model. It's a little hard to see, but you can see here in the picture on the bottom, these little cushions on the inside and outside, that's your meniscus. So when you're recovering from an ACL tear, there's also these other structures that you have to recover from too. And actually, to kind of show you this in action, Maya's going to pull up a video of just kind of your classic non-contact ACL tear. And why she's doing that, because it's just going to take a few minutes, feel free to type into the chat so far if there's anything that kind of shocked you that I had talked about already. Is there questions that you have, like things that make you feel like, oh, I'm so surprised by that information and you want to know more? I just felt like I had, as a kid, been in some crazy falls, and then, I just pivoted weird and all of a sudden I injured myself. So that was a big surprise for me. All right, so this is a video of a classic non-contact ACL tear. So he basically just tries to change direction. He slips. That right knee goes inward and rotates, and the ACL is torn. And so I just want to encourage people that there is movement, in sports readiness assessments are essential in assessing your movement and how you move to prevent these kind of injuries, not just the ACL, but there's so many joints in your legs. So whether it's ankle sprains or any hip injuries, how you move is really important, not only prevent injury, but to play better too. So like I was talking about, I just list kind of the major things that contribute to ACL tears from happening. And so the first four are really important. Those are things that are like intrinsic things about our bodies, and things that actually make females more likely to tear their ACLs. So like I mentioned, jumping, landing, and pivoting, the technique of that can really affect how much stress you're putting on that ligament and the alignment of your legs. So females in general, for example, have wider hips, makes the knees want to go inward, again, increasing their risk for that injury. Also, excessive ligament laxity. Sometimes that comes with genetics, like you just generally have loose joints. But also, depending on females' menstrual cycles, it changes the ligament laxity, and thus there's certain times that they're more likely to tear their ligament. Also muscle firing patterns. So females tend to have more dominant quads, and they tend to fire first before the hamstrings, causing the knee to hyperextend more. And in general sports that involve a lot of running and cutting, there's a lot of quad dominance. And the last thing is also important. So this is happening more often because there's just an intensity and capacity mismatch. So intensity meaning how often and how intense you're playing your sport versus like what your body can tolerate. So we've seen this because there's been an increase in year-round play, also just in one particular sport, like specializing in soccer, for example. And then on top of that, playing on multiple soccer teams at the same time year round. And that just gives a lack of active recovery time. You don't necessarily have to rest, but just doing something to kind of cross train and give your body a break. That being said, also picking what you do to train is really important, because speaking from experience, I was doing fitness after soccer practice because I really wanted to perform better. And that was just compounding on the issue. I wasn't allowing my body to recover. So it ultimately led to injury as opposed to enhancing my performance. Next slide. So God forbid you tear your ACL. What do you do? I mean, as a parent now too, I just feel like this is valuable information because it can be overwhelming. There's just such a terrible feeling when your child gets injured and needs surgery. So we have, Maya's going to put a link in the chat where we have some wonderful resources that we're going to share with you throughout the presentation. So for example, we have this parent guide that talks about from injury to surgery, what to expect, as well as just managing fall sport injuries. So this is just, if you want to hope for the best, but if you're prepared for the worst, you're just going to feel a lot better going through something like this. But basically for the parent guide about the ACL tears, I'm just going to briefly go over it. It's going to talk about, how to pick what surgeon or procedure. And so there's two different types. There's the autograft, where the tissue or the graft's taken from you, and then there's allograft, where it's taken from someone else. So for the autograft, it's either taken from the patellar tendon that's in the front of the knee, or from the hamstring tendon in the back. And there's pros and cons to each type. So that means in terms of like how long it's going to take you to recover, what complications are associated, how strong is the graft. So I think my recommendation is go with what the surgeon specializes in. If you find a surgeon that you really like and they specialize in a certain type, go with that. The only thing I would say with the hamstring graft, that's probably my least favorite, because you're taking tissue from something that we're trying to rebuild due to that muscle firing imbalance. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that one. And in the parent guide, we also talk about the psychological aspect of having a sports injury and just recovering from your ACL. I just think it's really important to prepare for this also, because that was a bit of a shock to me. Not only, obviously, I was sad I was injured, but just that I had to be prepared to still go to practice, but just sit on the sidelines and watch. And that stress actually really affects the recovery process, not even from a healing standpoint, but I just feel like people put a lot of pressure on themselves to come back too soon. And that leads to re-ruptures and just, again, being back to square one. So again, I would encourage to develop a ACL recovery support team, or really for any sport injury. So that would include your physical therapist, your surgeon, any friends or family that either can relate to the experience. But there's also stuff online. A previous teammate of mine unfortunately had multiple ACL tears, and she developed the ACL Club, which is an online resource for people to, feel like they're not alone when they have torn their ACL. And Maya's sharing the link right now. All right, next slide. I'd highly recommend checking it out. So again, talking about the recovery period, current research in 2016 that says that on average it's about 8 months. That being said, it kind of depends on the person, what intensity of the sport, like what the intensity is before you get back and what structures are injured and all that. So it can be up to 18 months. And again, you just don't want to come back too soon. And you have to really address the underlying movement issues that I was talking about earlier. And the only really way to do that is to have a sports readiness assessment, because it's just these things, if your movement patterns were off from the get-go, it's not just recovering from that injury, it's like addressing these things that were leading up to the injury itself. And so I would highly recommend in your part of your recovery should include some things like functional training, which I'll explain more later in the presentation. Also, the AlterG treadmill is a wonderful tool that we use often in the clinic, and not only from a recovery standpoint, but also for helping people perform the best they can in their sport. So Maya, do you mind hitting on the next slide? So what is an AlterG treadmill? If you haven't seen the 60 Minute, I think it was Alex Smith who had a terrible leg injury, like he fractured it, got infected, he almost died. It was seriously devastating. He had an amazing recovery and actually used the AlterG and is now playing NFL football again. It's really amazing story. I highly recommend that you check it out too. But with AlterG treadmill, what it is it uses air pressure to unweight a runner. That way we can address running form you could run with less force on your body. It also provides measurable and valuable information about your running form. We can check for asymmetries, maybe in step length or width, what's your cadence like. This helps improve the brain-body connection, which is also damaged when you have an injury. And it also allows you to maximize your performance. Say you don't have an injury, basically you're able to train at a higher intensity with less stress on the body. And we actually have a video, if you want to see it in action, of one of our patients. This is Dr. J. And this is from the rear view. So you can do kind of a gait assessment, from outside the AlterG, but we also have a video monitor inside so we can see what's happening from different angles while the patient or client is running. On the monitor too, we have that valuable objective information I was discussing. And again, like back to my own injury, I thought I was enhancing my performance by doing the same thing more, when in reality, I was hurting myself because it was at the same load and intensity on my joints and on my ligaments, everything. So at least with this, we can unweight a runner or an athlete, and they can perform at that intensity with less stress. Next slide. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. I just feel like we've really seen people benefit from it. And if you're interested in trying it out and doing a demo, just give us a call at the office. Maya, if you don't mind putting our number up, because we can make an appointment and you can demo and try it for yourself. So some other prevention options are, we were talking about the active recovery things. Depending on your sport and what's available to you, you'll probably select different things, but usually getting in the pool is a good idea. Doing yoga to help increase like flexibility and stability of your body, or getting on the bike. But also there's a tool called the Hypervolt percussive device. And I had mentioned about those extrinsic things where you're playing different sports year round, or just one sport and multiple teams. And it really limits the amount of recovery, active recovery you can do. So if you are tight on time, I would highly recommend doing the Hypervolt. It's a percussive device. It uses vibration to help increase flexibility and stimulate recovery of your muscles. And what I like about it too is you can use it at different times. You don't have to use it just after practice. You can use it like before practice and just really prep the muscles, and that way they're ready to perform at their best. Again, like we would love to show you it. So just give us a call at the office if you want to come in and check it out. And we also have a lot of videos that we can share with you of, how to use it for different injuries. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis of what you might need. So definitely give us a call. So other injury prevention things is making sure you have proper strength and flexibility of certain muscles. So specifically strength of the hamstrings, core, and hip abductors, and the internal rotators. You also want to make sure that your hips and quads are pretty flexible. However, that being said, all these can be flexible or strong. But if you have a mechanical issue, like your technique is risky, that's all that strength and flexibility is not going to matter. So that's why functional training, which I'll talk about next, is really important. And how to do that properly is getting a sports assessment or sports screening so we can provide the right tools for you to address these mechanical or technical issues with your movement. So what is functional training? It's exercises that are focused on movement technique. So this enhances that brain-body connection I was talking about. And again, if you should start this at any age, because even the sports readiness assessment, because even from a young age, we're developing these movement patterns, and it's harder to unlearn non-ideal movement patterns. So the sooner your child or yourself starts this, the better. Again, it's going to improve the muscle firing pattern. It's going to utilize those hip stabilizers to prevent that movement of the knees going in. Also increasing control of the foot and ankle. It's just not about your hips. So again, we have some video examples of what you want to generally start with is more simple movements and getting those really solid, and then going to more complex dynamic movements, and then sport-specific movements. So we have one of Dr. Andrews' patients here. She's doing a lateral step down, and we're using some taping to help enhance that brain-body connection and protect the knee. So with alignment, again, you want to just watch that knee window, which is that space between the knees, making sure that that's not getting too small. Make sure that her knee is tracking in line with her toes. Good. And then also looking at the hips, making sure there's no hip drop. So now she's on to a more dynamic movement. And even though this seems like something in isolation, I think this is a lacrosse player, field hockey. She's bending down and doing these motions so much. So it's really important that she has good stability. So as you can tell, this one is pretty difficult for her. And imagine doing that at high speed or at sport speed. And so after this video, or after this exercise, it's more sport specific stuff. So we'll usually try and play a little game, and it makes it kind of fun. And in the next video, basically, Dr. Andrews just kind of throwing tennis balls around, and she has to go pick them up and, do them with good form. So you always want to bring it back to sport. So sometimes just kind of going online and seeing oh, these are good exercises. It's not just your form's really important. Oh, and then also the sliding board here. So she does her sliding board, and then we'll do the ball throwing. So there's lots of options out there. It's just about kind of what are the movement issues, and you don't really know what those are unless you're assessed by someone that's a movement specialist, like a physical therapist. All right, next slide. So basically, to close out our conversation or this presentation is, I can't say enough how important it is to get screened or get assessed, not even from the injury part, but just enhancing your play and your performance at your sport. So what is a sports readiness assessment? It's a technique assessment by a movement specialist, like a physical therapist, to determine your susceptibility for injury, enhance your performance or move better and play better. And also the takeaway of getting an individualized program to maximize your outcomes or your results. There are some existing programs out there. In the link that Maya shared earlier, we're going to give you also the PEP program. This is a pretty comprehensive program that's been around for a while. Basically, it includes a warm-up, some strengthening, plyometrics, and agility, and some stretching at the end. It is research supported to help decrease risk of tearing your ACL for soccer players. And the important thing is, you could read this and go through this, but you kind of have to understand, again, those movement patterns and just what you're looking out for. So I actually have a video of my niece. She's a 12-year-old, kind of getting into soccer herself, doing what I think are like the kind of 5 important things to really watch when your, son or daughter or teammate or is doing this. So she's doing the double limb hop. So again, watching that knee window, like, are those knees coming together? What's happening? Is she absorbing the shock load or shock well? And then we have side to side single leg hops. Again, watch that left knee, especially on all these jumps. I'm just noticing that that leg is pretty high risk of injury, whether it's a knee injury or hip or ankle. So yeah, there's double limb hops forward and back and side to side, and same with the single leg hops forward and back and side to side. And then you do also want to watch them do more, like in the strengthening section, there's more or less complex movements. So just doing those walking lunges, if there's an issue there, just doing the more dynamic stuff is going to be really unstable. And so you can also see in this video of her doing the walking lunge, it's a little better, but it's inconsistent, that last end range of motion, the knees coming in. So I'd highly recommend that she would have a tailored program to help prevent herself from getting injured. In the next video, we have a patient that's been working on this as well, with Dr. Miriam. We only have today her demonstrating that forward jump, but you can see a huge difference between the 2 videos or the 2 people. And again, it just takes lots of practice to kind of facilitate that movement pattern. So as you can see, there's a big knee window. The knees are tracking in line with the toes. She's absorbing the load really well. There you go. Very good. So in addition to the PEP program, or the Prevent Injury Enhanced Performance program, I mean, that's what we're offering, a sports readiness assessment, like a movement analysis, that not only for soccer players, but any sport. We have a lot of therapists that specialize in different sports. Like, I can speak for soccer or running, but Dr. Andrew played baseball, and Dr. J golf, and Dr. Miriam tennis. And we have everybody that can help you out. And we have a offer going on right now. We've been having these sports readiness assessments since August, and have been helping a lot of different athletes. But if you call us today, this is still offered for free at $275 value. And we're only offering this for a specific time. And I think Maya can agree that this has been super helpful for many of our patients.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I mean, we have a few patients that come into us even just monthly, before like big meets or even things like that. And they just make sure that they're ready to go. I mean, if your sport is important to you and you're really excited to do it, and you want to be the best at it, you always have to strive for more. So we definitely agree in the office that making sure that your body is moving right and doing the correct things so you don't injure yourself. I mean, if you love the sport and you're not on the field, it's hard. Not only, I mean, I'm sure it was hard for you, Lauren, when you weren't able to play, right?
Yeah.
And
that was an extremely surprising thing for me. I mean, you never want to get hurt, but until you go through it, it's hard to really know what to expect, not only from a recovery standpoint, but a emotional standpoint. So again, I wish this information was presented to me before I had my injury. It was just kind of getting out there. People just notice this trend increasing. And so they're like, oh, wow, we really need to address this. And also, just going back to what you're saying about the sports readiness assessment, I just feel like if I could have known how to play smarter, not harder, by doing those fitness drills after practice, I just thought I was doing what would have helped me and not hurt me. So that's why this type of information can be is extremely valuable.
Yeah, it's great. And there's nothing that could come out of it, that wouldn't be helpful. It's an hour with a physical therapist. It's great information. You want to get ahead of it before anything happens. Like you had said at the beginning, I mean, we've had a lot of patients call us, and it's what, 4 weeks into school, and we've already had injuries.
Yeah.
A lot of them play year round, and so their body's already tired. They don't, take a break or anything like that, or make sure that they weren't moving correctly. And when I was a kid, I don't, like you said, Lauren, I mean, we didn't really worry about that. We didn't know. So it's injuries all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we have so many resources where we can make sure that our athletes prepared. So it's a huge deal, and it's great. And like you said, it's only to the end of September that we're offering this. So
Yeah, it's
we've
just
got
a
about
week.
like a week and a half left. Yeah, not even a week and a half, a week left. So it's great. It's great for people to see. And even parents, just to see what they should be recognizing when they're on the field, when their students on the field. Maybe they wouldn't know if your knee's going inward, but maybe if they're prepared and they're seeing it firsthand with you, or you're explaining to them, then maybe they can be able to watch for something like that, because it's not easy to not be able to play the sport you love, and I know that, and that firsthand.
Also,
or even do anything you love, working out, anything.
Definitely. And also, speaking from a parent perspective, like there's just always a lot going on. So there's a lot of noise. So it's hard to, not that you're not worried about your child getting injured, or like, you want them to maximize their performance in their sport and enjoy it. But just like even going through this with my niece, my sister was like, oh my God, like I had no idea that that's like, because it's happening at such high speed, that's hard to really pick these things up. And then she's like, oh, like I need her. She signed up for the webinar like immediately after, and she's like, send me all this stuff, so I think it's one of those things where it takes someone just kind of priming you, being like, hey, like this is a big issue that a lot of people are going through, unfortunately too late, so but I want to make
people are just not aware, unfortunately, that they have the option.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so true. But I'd love to answer any questions. I don't know if whether people put in the chat or just some common ones that people are asking when they call the front desk. Maya, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. I will pull that up. Just 1 second. I've got it going. Okay, so I've written some questions in there just to get the conversation going, and then Morris Sussex Sports actually asked a great question.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna put that
Love
one
those
up
guys.
first, and we can they're great. We love them. So Morris Sussex Sports asked, what can an athlete do to strengthen themselves to lower the risk of ACL injury?
Yeah, so
maybe like what exercises?
That's a great question. So basically, kind of like the functional training discussion, you want to start simple because it kind of depends on what the issue is. There's certain muscle groups that are likely to be weak, but it's also a muscle firing thing. So I've had patients where the sides of their hips are super strong, but then as soon as they do that step down exercise, their leg is going everywhere. So it's just, I think you have to really tie it together, but just to kind of talk in a general sense, like when you start off, you want to kind of limit the noise, like limit the influences. So it'd be stuff that's called open chained exercise. So the foot's not touching the ground. So if I'll just use hips as an example, I mean, that might not be the person's issue, but that's like usually a big one. So just doing leg lifts on your side could be one. Again, there could be so many compensations when that happens. Like I'll have people do that exercise and their knee or their leg totally goes forward just because that quad wants to start working instead. So again, that's why you kind of need someone to kind of watch you or just kind of know the form is really important. Like you just can't have those patterns, those poor movement patterns like solidified. So side laying leg lifts are good with that caveat, like knowing like, okay, that leg can't come forward. And then obviously there's things with like the band standing or just like, Dr. Andrew had some great exercises that we're working on kind of multi-joint and like hip stability stuff. So I hope that answers the question, but you can apply that to any muscle group you're trying to focus on, because same thing with hamstrings. Like if you're doing a bridge, that's when you're on your back and lifting your bottom up. People usually just lift their back, and so there's no muscles activated in the hamstring. So how you can check yourself is like, or have someone check you, just place your hand on your hamstring versus like your glute, and it's like, which one is actually working? Is your
Yeah.
hamstring on holiday? Like, so it's just kind of like, it's important how you do the exercise. It's not necessarily just what they are, but how you do them.
Yeah. I feel like personally for me, I have really tight hamstrings. So it's hard for me to even, and I work out all the time. I love working out, but it's hard for me even to, make sure in your head, because you have to actually be aware, right? Be aware of your body. It's not like you just go do it. You have to be aware of your body and what your body's doing. So it's when like, let's see, like some type of hamstring exercise, other than just touching it, what do you think is a good way to like remind yourself of form and things like that? Like just flexing the muscle, or, how do you, make sure that you're firing the muscle?
There's a couple of different ways you can do that. I mean, obviously you can, cell phones are an easy way. If you have like a selfie stick or some stand, you could video yourself
Yeah.
doing it about form or alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you think about what you're doing, like you really break it down. So even with part of our runners assessment, we have one specially for runners that we have some continuing education around. We have the person lay on their back, and can they just flex their bottom? And then, because basically what happens with a lot of runners is like, again, it's that quad dominance, and the hamstrings aren't even working, and they're just kind of those hip extensors are on holiday too. So can you even flex in isolation? And a lot of times people have a hard time with that. Like it can't coordinate it. So
yeah, I know personally, like having to learn, everything about exercising, it's easy to just do it wrong. So to have somebody to be able to be there to help you to make sure you're doing it right is great. And then, you're never going to get better without making sure that you're doing it correct. You may injure yourself, like we've been talking
definitely.
about. So one question I had, just personally, how do you improve your quad to hamstring dominance? Like, let's say you're quad dominant. How do you, balance that out?
Yeah. So I think it's more kind of inhibiting that quad from firing. Like I had used that hip side leg lift. So Dr. Michelle has a really good technique too, where it's like, okay, can you give your body some other input? Like, so sometimes we use tape or any kind of tactile or touch sort of thing. So she has her patients like, look, put your bottom up against the wall, and that heel cannot leave the wall, so that's how that quad is not, kind of taken over. And same with the hamstring thing. It's really like, it's just kind of waking them up. So again, like talking about the bridge, like making sure those are firing versus like just moving your back. And then you bring it all back together with that functional movement training, again, more simply with the lateral step down, kind of like you'll know if the quad is overworking because, your knee will be going too far forward and, things like that. So you can kind of have these little things about your movement that you can identify, like, oh, and you'll feel it. You'll feel your muscle like, oh, my quad sore. Is like, well, shoot, it's supposed to be the side of my hip, So you can kind of feel as you do more repetitions, like what's working.
Okay. Another question that I had was, so you kept saying there's like valuable information that comes up on the screen for the AlterG. Can you like tell me a little bit more about that? What type of valuable information, and how does it help improve either your running or, like, let's say if you have an ACL injury, how does it help?
Definitely. So again, like the fact that we can unweight someone, and so you can do the movement and enhance that like brain body connection without stressing, whether you have an injury or not, like, because I think again, it's like we're talking about overtraining issues and stuff, and like, working with runners and stuff, like, oh, should I not be doing more running and stuff like that? But it's like, okay, if we can enhance that brain body connection, making sure that we can optimize your form. But in terms of the information that people get, like how much time are you spending on each foot? Like it's like, oh, of course my right leg or side is bothering me. I'm spending like twice as much time on that foot, things like that. Or like I'm taking a much longer step with on my left side. And, and so we can get that kind of information because again, like pre Alter G, you would just watch somebody run or maybe get them on like a regular treadmill. But it's just not the same because it would just be this visual assessment where you could like upload it and kind of do different angles and things and kind of get an idea. But I just feel like it's more specific.
Yeah. And I believe the Alter G, you can, I was talking to Matthew the other day about it, the Alter G versus like aqua therapy. Somebody who, aqua therapy is great. I don't believe it takes off as much weight as the Alter G can. And also you can get into the Alter G right after surgery. And you can't get in the water after surgery, right? Because you just got surgery. So there's a huge benefit there too, right?
Yeah, just implementing it sooner. I mean, again, that brain body connection is damaged also. And it's kind of like, okay. And then also we can kind of get those muscles activating and working sooner. And again, we can kind of fine tune how much weight we're going to allow on your body versus like in the water, you just kind of get in and there's no information. Like we have no idea. Like, yeah, you're unweighted a little bit, but there's no tracking improvement, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Great. Is there any other questions from everybody? I don't see any in the chat right now. If you're being shy, we're happy to answer anything. And this webinar isn't just about ACL. Like it is dominantly about ACL, but all sports. We want to make sure every student is prepared to play their sport. So if you have any questions about baseball, maybe like the shoulder, we see a lot of like Tommy John surgery. Isn't that Tommy John surgeries nowadays? Is that what it's called?
No, it's
that's the elbow.
Yeah, that's okay.
Elbow.
That's
okay. Well, still, that's like a common baseball injury, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, that's something huge. So if anybody has any more questions, we're happy to answer. If you guys need anything, you're more than welcome to always call us. I of course will answer the phone. I don't know as much as Dr. Lauren, but we're always available to talk anything. If you have any questions, we just want to make sure that our student athletes are taken care of. And I know how much more Sussex Sports loves their athletes. That's what they're there for. So we're so happy they joined us. Oh, it looks like we got another question here from George Muha, actually. Hi, George. So George says, what separates Pro PT and training from all the other physical therapy companies out there?
Yeah.
This is a huge question. We love it. I love this question. So do you want to answer, Lauren? Or
I think we both should. I'll start just because, I mean, I had talked about teams in general, like not only the physical therapist, but the front desk is like part of our team. Like we're all here to support our patients or clients, and so I think we're very unique in that we offer 1 hour one-on-one with a licensed physical therapist at a doctorate level, because I've worked in a majority of clinics just from traveling around to different states, and they were all wonderful, but that time is so valuable. Again, for those little things, like I was saying, like you're really watching your form instead of just like having an aide there that doesn't have that training being like, okay, do like 3 sets of 10, And so I just feel like people really benefit from that and they get better faster. There's great physical therapists out there, but we just have that time with people, which I can't emphasize how valuable that is.
Yeah, I know, I work at the front desk and I do everything online for us. And I truly personally think you guys are the best, and I obviously I love you all to death, but you all care so much. And I'm not saying that other physical therapies companies don't care, but it's we're a family, you know, when you come into our clinic, you're welcomed in as a family member, and we will do everything and anything we can do to help you. We will be there for you. We will do everything that we can. And you know, the one-on-one treatment, not only do we think it's a big deal, but our patients think it's a big deal. You know, we've had plenty of people who've had to, you know, either move or anything like that, and all of them, you know, say the same thing. It's such a huge deal to have that one-on-one treatment, because a lot of places, and I don't want to talk illy of anybody, a lot of places have, you know, 15 minutes with a physical therapist, or a little bit less, and we just find that it works best for us, and we absolutely love being able to spend time with our patients. So it's great, and we love it.
Yeah, just to continue on that too, it's like, because of the pandemic, like there's this big push with telehealth and telemedicine.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
imagine only having 15 minutes with a patient, like via telehealth. Like, you know, so I mean, even
Yeah.
if you don't live in the Madison, you know, New Jersey area, like we can still help you. I think we definitely would have to like discuss, you know, because depending on where you are, you know, in the circumstance, like how we could help you.
Yeah.
But there's that possibility. And then also what makes professional PT and training pretty unique is that we're located in the Madison YMCA. So yes, we have like a beautiful office, but we have access to an entire building of treatment options for people, because, you know, obviously depending on the person or where they are in the recovery, there's different times. And then at sometimes I'm like not even in the office because we're running around doing different machines in the building, because at that point they're just so high level. So it's great because it's like, I feel like there's something for everybody versus being kind of sequestered to this one office or one room.
Yeah, it's great. All of our patients love it a lot too. And I think it's good also, like you said, when you get to the higher level, then you're able to work on the machines that when maybe the patient, or when they're not with us, then they can work on those machines by themselves to make sure that they're doing it correctly too. Because a lot of the times I get on a machine and I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, you bring up
and I have to ask.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point too. It's like kind of, you know, the job of us as PTs is not only to help you recover, but also, you know, kind of give you the tools to managing, you know, any potential complication there forward. So kind of like, you know, whether that's even becoming a member at the Y, it's like, okay, I'm confident in this space, and then what I'm doing is going to help me. And again, we're still there for you. So like, even if, you know, you don't come into the Y, like you can always call us, you know, and we're happy to help.
Yeah. I love it. This is great. We could talk for hours.
Totally.
So if anybody has any other questions, go ahead and type them into the chat. I know I see this all the time. I've seen a lot of I'll ask myself. I've seen a lot of different massage guns out there. I went into Costco the other day and they had it like on special, right? So is there a difference? But I love Costco too. I spend way too much money there. I get too much food. So is there a difference between the ones that are in Costco and the Hypervolt, the machine that we use in the clinic?
Yeah, so I mean, there's similarities in that they're both percussive devices. Like they're going to provide vibration to kind of help the muscle recover, increase flexibility, all those sort of things. However, with the Hypervolt line or the Hyper Ice line, like it's research supported. So there's just, I've used it in the clinic because I always want to use something that has some research behind it. And I've just seen it clinically and personally help whatever I need to be accomplished. And so I think that that's why I would recommend it, or I can stand behind it. Like I have no association with them other than that I just like their products.
Yeah. And I know personally, I've seen, it's the therapy of the NFL. And I've seen that. I think that was one of the tools that Lindsey Vonn, the skier, had used to get back after her injury, and Brian Griffin and all those great people. So it's a really great product, and we love it. It's just, you're always curious because you see them everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see them all over the place, all these different companies. So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
But I don't think I see any more questions on there. So if anybody has one, we'll let it sit for, you know, however you want to do, like another minute. Let them sit and see if anybody has any other questions.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll just kind of be
Yeah.
here for you. And, in the meantime, just
Yeah.
kind of, talk about things that we hear about that would be helpful for people. I just think, again, even though, like Maya said, this was about a presentation about ACLs, like, again, this could be any lower extremity issue, because it's not necessarily, what we're treating, it's the why. Like, whenever you're treating the what or the symptom, like, people don't have great long-term results. So you really have to get to the why. And I mean, that includes the whole lower extremity or even up into the trunk or the whole person. And again, like, we have the sports readiness assessment can be for any athlete, like an upper extremity athlete, so I think it's just kind of being as prepared as you can as you go through your season. Actually, that was like one of the quotes from my soccer coach, old college coach, Jerry Smith. It was like we had these measurable goals throughout season, and honestly, it was just how to keep us all healthy and make it to the end of season without injury. So it's just, I think that was one of them that really stuck with me. It's just like, okay, we got it. Like, not only these objective goals of, like, having more shots on goal or more fouls, showing that we were more aggressive or dominant team, but also just like, how can we keep ourselves healthy? So there was a big push for that. And it just kind of started for a lot of coaches and teams at that point, because they're just noticing so many people getting injured.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm writing into the chat. I am writing in the chat the link to all the great information that we're offering today. So we've got the PEP program, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got the Parents Guide to Managing
Sports
Injuries.
Yeah, 2 guides for parents.
We've got the what to do guide, and then we've got the ACL Club. We've got some exercises, right?
Just that, like, video again, because the exercises are more on from the PEP program, but they were kind of like my top 5. Like, I mean, I would say if you have time to do the whole program, but some of them are very straightforward in terms of mechanics. It's just like, jogging or backward running, things that I don't think necessarily they're important, but like, I wanted to kind of bring out the big ones. Like, if you're kind of doing these jumping maneuvers improperly, then the program's not going to be effective. So we'll share that video, maybe like a compressed version of improper form and proper form for those jumping movements.
Great. So I put the link in there again. And if anybody wants to sign up for the sports readiness assessment, I have that in there also. And like we said, this is for any sport. It doesn't have to be for one specific ACL injury, anything like that. So we've got it all set up for you.
Also, again, thank you so much to Morris Sussex Sports. And thank you to all of you for joining in.
Yep.
It was nice.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, you can always also write us on Facebook, Instagram, any of that, and or give us a call. We'd love to speak with anybody. And just, if you just have any questions, just call and ask, because we're more than happy to answer them to you. All right.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Have a good
Maya.
weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye, Laura.